The forest was alive with whispers. Wind slid through glass-like trees, and their translucent trunks refracted the faint green glow of the moss below. Corporal David Holt lay prone in that light, motionless except for the subtle rhythm of his breath beneath the gilly shroud that made him look like another patch of the living forest. The weight of his rifle pressed into his shoulder, a steady reassurance in a world that had otherwise turned alien. Through the optic, his world narrowed to a single green-tinted circle of focus. He waited, as snipers always did, not for a target, but for purpose to reveal itself. His spotter drone, Ghost, hovered 30 meters behind him, invisible to the untrained eye, but steady in his visor feed. Its faint hum merged with the ambient noise of the forest. Alien birds, dripping dew, the gentle pulse of some unknown insectoid rhythm. Holt ignored it all. The mission was simple. Locate and eliminate the hostile marksman responsible for picking off 3 members of the reconnaissance unit earlier that morning. Yet simplicity in orders never meant ease in execution. Somewhere within this crystalline jungle, a killer had already proven capable of matching human precision, and Holt had no illusions of superiority. He exhaled slowly, whispering the mantra that had guided him through every engagement since Mars. One breath. One death. It wasn't bravado, only discipline. The breath controlled the hand delivered the shot ended the threat. Everything else, fear, fatigue, pain, was background noise. Command, this is Shadow 3, he murmured, voice barely audible. No visual. Forest densities playing hell with thermal. Recommend drone sweep, pattern Delta 5. A soft click answered in his earpiece. Negative, Shadow 3. Drone sweeps already compromised 2 hours ago. Maintain observation. You're our last eye on grid 27. He cut the channel. Orders were orders, but they always came from men sitting safe inside orbital carriers, reading data without tasting dirt or blood. Down here, things were different. Every gust of wind, every flicker of light through those glass trees could be death approaching. Holt shifted slightly, letting his rifle rest on the bipod, scope adjusting automatically to the forest's refracted hues. Movement, faint but distinct. A ripple in the pattern ahead, something that didn't move like foliage. He steadied his breath, focusing on the distortion. The figure emerged slowly into visibility, its outline imperfect, like a mirage struggling to maintain form. It was humanoid, but elongated, cloaked in a membrane that shimmered with adaptive camouflage. Through the scope, Holt saw 4 eyes arranged in a vertical line and armor that pulsed faintly, as though alive. Target acquired, he whispered. Not human. The alien crouched beside a fallen crystalline trunk, its weapon long and angular, wrapped in the same organic mesh that covered its body. It moved with purpose, not the hesitant steps of a scavenger, but the deliberate stillness of a professional. Holt felt a shiver, recognition. Across 1,000 meters of alien terrain, he understood that this was not just an enemy soldier. This was another sniper. He adjusted his magnification. The alien's rifle, if it could be called that, used a glowing chamber that thrummed like a heartbeat. Energy weapon, high-velocity pulse, no recoil, minimal report. Perfect for long-range engagements. He admired the design, even as he calculated how to kill its wielder. Ghost pulsed a warning icon in his visor. Energy anomaly detected. Vector southeast. Range 990 meters. Holt acknowledged with a blink. Mark position. Hold passive. The drone dimmed and went silent. He remembered training on Titan. The endless hours spent learning to merge with the environment, to become invisible not through technology, but through patience. The instructors had said that true snipers communicate with the land. Holt wondered if this alien hunter believed the same thing, if somewhere in its mind it was thinking words similar to his own. Find, observe, and for a long minute, neither moved. The forest seemed suspended between 2 heartbeats. Holt could feel the weight of that alien gaze, even without seeing its eyes directly. He knew the truth of duels like this. Whoever flinched first, Whoever let instinct overpower training would die. He adjusted his scope again, lowering magnification to study terrain rather than target. Between them stretched uneven ground littered with crystalline roots and misty depressions that distorted depth perception. No clear shot without risk of refraction. Both snipers would have to anticipate the distortion, compensate for the light-bending glass trees, and rely purely on instinct. That, at least, was human territory. A faint vibration traveled through the moss beneath his elbow, a sonic disturbance, low and steady. The alien was recalibrating its weapon. Holt's pulse quickened. He marked the angle, recalculated wind drift, and exhaled. Still no clean shot. Then, through his scope, he saw something he hadn't expected. The alien had turned its upper body slightly, just enough to reveal a face beneath the camouflage. A face watching him. Through the scope, through 2 layers of magnification, the alien's 4 eyes aligned perfectly with his lens. It knew he was there. For a heartbeat, Holt froze. It wasn't fear, exactly, but the cold shock of realization. 2 predators had already seen each other, and only one would leave this forest. He steadied his breathing, thumb resting gently on the trigger pad. Across the distance, the alien raised its weapon with the same deliberation. No words, no sound, only the shared understanding of what came next. Holt's breath slowed until it vanished. He felt the world narrow again, just his heartbeat, the crosshairs, and the faint shimmer of a distant enemy. The clock inside his head began counting, a soldier's instinct carved from years of repetition. 20 seconds. That was all he would need. He whispered it once more, letting the words fuse with the silence around him. 1 breath. 1 death. The forest listened. The alien listened. And for the first time since arriving on Virel Prime, Holt felt the strange weight of equality. 2 hunters, 2 species, 1 inevitable conclusion. He adjusted the rifle's elevation and closed his left eye. The shot hadn't yet been fired, but the war between them had already begun. The first second vanished in silence. Holt's finger brushed the trigger pad, the weapon humming faintly as its magnetic coils charged. Across the valley of mist and glass, the alien moved with the same economy of motion, its 4 eyes adjusting independently, analyzing wind vectors, light refraction, and temperature flux. Neither fired. Patience was part of the kill. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, suspended between 2 acts of will. At the 5th second, Holt shifted his cheek a millimeter along the rifle's frame, aligning for the subtle updraft created by the planet's uneven thermal layers. He imagined the alien doing the same. Ghost feed flickered once, and then failed, static poured across his visor. The signal jammer had gone live. He was alone now, stripped of every advantage except instinct. Holt didn't curse. He'd expected this. A sniper stripped of tools revealed what they truly were. He focused on the mantra that kept his hands steady. Breathe. Align. Release. By the 7th second, his mind had emptied of everything except calculation. He felt the recoil before it came, the pull of muscle memory guiding thought. He imagined the alien's perspective, wondered if those 4 eyes saw him as prey or rival. Through the scope, the shimmer moved again, ghost-like between trees. Holt tracked it, slowly, deliberately, waiting for a break in the crystal trunks. The distortion paused. He fired. The railgun released a burst of kinetic energy, so fast it tore the air apart, the slug whistling into the distance with a sound like a collapsing star. The recoil slammed against his shoulder, muted but immense. A half-second later, the alien's weapon flared, a streak of blue-white light slicing through the mist. 2 shots in the same heartbeat. Shards of molten glass exploded around Holt's position. 1 fragment cut across his glove, searing through fabric and flesh. He rolled instinctively, moving 3 meters to a new angle. The alien's plasma beam scorched the moss where he had been, burning it to black ash. He didn't stop to look. Movement meant survival. Stillness meant target. At 12 seconds, he reloaded with mechanical precision. A hiss of cooling air whispered from the rifle's chamber. His shoulder ached, blood trickling between his fingers, but pain was information, not distraction. He adjusted his optic to short-range thermal. The alien's form was gone, replaced by faint heat residue along the crystalline bark. Either it had moved or learned to mask its thermal signature. Holt admired that. Only professionals adapted mid-engagement. He thought of the soldiers who died earlier that day. He hadn't known their names well, only their voices on comms, but he remembered the panic in their tones when the first beam had cut through their squad. Those men had been infantry, open targets. He, however, was the answer to that ambush. That was why he remained breathing. The mission wasn't vengeance, it was balance. By the 15th second, a faint pulse shimmered at the edge of his scope. There, the alien had repositioned. Elevated ground, partial cover, same line of sight he would have chosen. It was mirroring him again. The realization almost made him laugh. Two minds solving the same equation from opposite sides. The only variable was who broke concentration first. The alien fired. The beam passed close enough to melt part of his barrel shroud. The smell of scorched polymer filled the air. Holt exhaled, adjusted 1 degree down, and returned fire. His slug shattered the crystal trunk shielding the alien. For an instant, he saw the creature clearly, pale skin like burnished stone, for eyes narrowing in focus. The second slug followed, punching through the splintered barrier. The alien dropped, but not dead. Its weapon arm twitched, recalibrating, charging again. Holt's visor flickered as his power core strained from rapid discharge. He ejected the spent pack, sliding a new one home with a click. The sound seemed deafening in the silence that followed. He had 5 seconds left. Enough time for one perfect shot. He steadied himself, drawing one slow breath. His shoulder throbbed, his glove slick with blood, but his eyes remained steady. Across the distance, the alien stood again, weapon raised. One of its upper eyes was dark, damaged by debris or bullet, he couldn't tell. Yet there was no fear in its stance, only precision. They were two artisans, each intent on completing a single flawless stroke. 18 seconds. Holt felt his heart rate drop deliberately, a trick learned long ago in training. Slow the pulse, extend control. His perception stretched until every sound seemed magnified. The hum of his rifle, the faint crackle of energy from the alien's weapon, even the distant trickle of water through moss. He saw everything with clarity, so sharp it hurt. 19 seconds. Both weapons fired. The shots crossed midair, invisible lines of death intersecting. The alien's beam grazed a shoulder, burning through armor and flesh, the pain instant and bright. Holt's slug met its mark, clean through the alien's skull, between the two central eyes. The creature's body convulsed once, then fell backward into the moss, weapon extinguished. The 20th second ended with silence. Holt stayed still for another full minute, breath shallow, eyes locked on the fallen figure. No movement, no trick, only the faint, rhythmic flicker of the forest returning to calm. He lowered his rifle slowly, muscles trembling from tension more than injury. Smoke curled from the scorched ground around him. The battle had lasted no longer than a breath, yet it felt like years compressed into seconds. He crawled forward, careful and methodical, until he reached a vantage point with a clear view of the alien's body. It lay twisted among the moss, one hand still gripping the weapon. There was a strange dignity in its posture, as if it had fallen mid-prayer. Holt's gaze lingered on the face, for eyes half open, expression unreadable. He exhaled once more, the mantra rising unbidden from habit rather than pride. One breath, one death. The words felt heavier now, not a triumph but an acknowledgement. The duel had ended, but its echo would remain with him. He pressed a hand to his shoulder wound, feeling the pulse of his own heartbeat beneath scorched armor. The air smelled of ozone and iron. Around him, the alien forest resumed its indifferent rhythm, as though nothing significant had happened. Yet Holt knew something had. This kill was different. This one had looked back. He gathered his rifle, reloaded automatically, and scanned the horizon. The mission was complete, but unease replaced satisfaction. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Something metallic reflected sunlight. Maybe another sniper, maybe the alien's command unit. He couldn't tell. He only knew the duel wasn't over in his mind. He took one more measured breath, steadied himself, and began to move toward the fallen enemy. Not as a soldier claiming victory, but as a man seeking to understand what kind of foe he had just killed. The body lay among the moss like a fallen sculpture, still glimmering faintly beneath the pale light filtering through the crystalline canopy. Holt approached with the slow caution of a man who had learned not to trust silence. His shoulder throbbed with every step, but pain grounded him. It was proof that he was still breathing. He stopped a meter away, lowering his rifle and letting his gaze settle on the alien's face. Death had not erased its intensity. Even in stillness, the creature seemed aware, its remaining eyes reflecting fragments of green and glass. He crouched beside it, studying the weapon clutched in its hand. The design fascinated him, organic, elegant, utterly foreign. The energy chamber pulsed weakly, as if unwilling to acknowledge its master's end. Holt touched the side of the rifle, and the pulse ceased, as though recognizing defeat. He felt an unexpected pang of respect. The alien had fought with discipline, precision, and an understanding of patience that few humans possessed. It hadn't been a monster. It had been a mirror. He activated his comms. "Command, this is Shadow 3. Target neutralized." "Repeat, target neutralized." Static answered him. Then a clipped voice broke through, distant and detached. "Confirmed, Shadow 3. Hold position for retrieval and debrief." "Copy," he said, though his tone was empty. Retrieval meant a cleanup crew, not a funeral. They'd take samples, strip the tech, file it under xenobiological warfare. He looked back at the alien and felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle over him. He had ended a life without understanding it. He glanced at the device mounted to the creature's chest, small, hexagonal, with glowing runes shifting like liquid light. It emitted a soft rhythm, a recorded pulse. Carefully, he detached it and activated his visor's translator. The device projected faint sounds, clicks, and hums that slowly formed into something almost human, a voice, low and calm. "We came to learn from the hunters of Earth," the translation whispered, "to understand how the fragile make death precise." Holt froze. The words didn't sound like conquest. They sounded like admiration, or perhaps curiosity. His stomach turned cold. This hadn't been an invasion. It had been an observation, a study, and he had just executed the researcher. He sat back, staring into the forest as realization crept through him. Humanity's violence had drawn attention again, and he had confirmed every fear they might have held about his species. He shut off the device and sat in silence. The forest buzzed faintly, alive again now that the tension of battle had dissipated. Overhead, shafts of light pierced the canopy, illuminating particles of dust and pollen that drifted lazily through the air. Holt felt the weight of his rifle in his hands, suddenly more burden than tool. He had defined his existence by precision, by the clean efficiency of the kill. But now, as he looked at the alien's body, that clarity blurred. If they had come seeking understanding, what had he just taught them? Minutes passed before he stood. His shoulder burned as he slung his rifle across his back. He scanned the ridge where the alien ship had been hovering hours before. It was still there, faintly visible through the clouds, a silent witness to what had occurred. He wondered if others were watching, recording, analyzing his every move. Perhaps they were already deciding what lesson they had learned from humanity's deadliest representative. He toggled the comm again. "Command, requesting scientific personnel for recovery. The target carries non-aggressive tech. Possible diplomatic data." There was a pause, then a weary voice replied, "Negative. Maintain perimeter. Intel team will assess when secure." Bureaucratic indifference. He could almost hear the unspoken calculation. Threat neutralized, situation contained, mission complete. Holt exhaled slowly, shutting off the channel. Orders were necessary in war, but this didn't feel like war. It felt like a conversation that had ended before it began. He returned to the body and began to dig. His knife was clumsy in the moss, but he worked with determination. He wasn't sure why. Ritual, respect, maybe guilt. The soil beneath was soft, dark, almost black. When the hollow was deep enough, he lifted the alien's form into it, careful not to disturb the weapon. As he covered it with earth and moss, he found himself murmuring the words his father had once said over fallen comrades. Rest easy. The fight's done. When the grave was finished, he placed a single rail slug atop it, polished and gleaming. The bullet caught the light and flashed once like a signal. He hesitated, then reactivated the alien's device and played the last recorded words again. The voice repeated its message, quiet and almost reverent. Holt stood there, translating it one final time in his mind. Not a declaration, but an offering. They came to learn. He whispered, maybe we both did. The forest answered only with wind. Holt turned his eyes skyward. The alien ship had begun to move, drifting slowly toward the horizon. It did not descend for vengeance or retaliation. Instead, it climbed, its hull reflecting sunlight until it vanished into the upper atmosphere. He wondered what report would reach their world, how they would describe the human sniper who responded to curiosity with a bullet. The thought settled heavily in his chest. He collected his rifle, checked his systems, and started toward the extraction point. Each step echoed softly on the moss. His wound ached, his muscles trembled, but he felt no triumph, no relief. Behind him, the forest closed over the grave, as if erasing evidence that the duel had ever happened. Halfway through the valley, he stopped and looked back one last time. A beam of light pierced the canopy, falling directly upon the mound of earth. It shimmered faintly, the moss pulsing with residual bioluminescence. For an instant, he imagined the alien's 4 eyes opening again. Not an accusation, but an understanding. The image stayed with him as he resumed his march. When the extraction beacon pulsed on his wrist display, he keyed in his final report. Target neutralized. No further hostiles. Recommend reclassification. Encounter, not engagement. They weren't invading. They were learning. He hesitated before sending it, knowing the words would be dismissed or redacted. Still, he sent them. Some truths deserve to be recorded, even if ignored. As the transport's thrusters roared in the distance, Holt took one last breath of the alien air. It smelled sharp and clean, untouched by war. He thought of the phrase that had defined his life, the one he had whispered before every shot. This time, it felt different on his tongue, less a creed, more a lament. One breath, he murmured, one death. Then he added softly, and sometimes one understanding too late. The wind carried the words away as he walked toward the rising dust of the incoming transport, leaving behind the quiet forest and a lesson it had given him, one he would carry longer than the scar on his shoulder.